this is 306. Yeah, turning right past. Okay, so day 3.5, because I saw that the stream died directly before the call-in about Brian's body. So I'm actually going to replay the entire Delilah devlog after I turn desktop audio on.
Yep. I came up with this character, Delilah, and then just thrust her upon you and said, you are going to be Delilah in this video game. I liked working with you on The Walking Dead. You were amazing as Katya. How did that character come to life for you?
Well, actually, I think her name was Alice at first, if you'll recall.
Oh, no, it was.
You remember that?
Oh, it was Alice. Oh, no. What a hilarious thing to have to remember.
I remember getting that email from you about, hey, I'm writing a game, female protagonist, are you in? And I didn't even have to think twice about it. I knew whatever you're working on, whenever, throughout history and time, I will want to be a part of. But then you sent me the sides for Alice, and I got to read about this beautifully flawed but fun and self-engaged woman. And it's one of the things I love about the characters that you write is that they're actual people. They're not tropes. They're not stereotypes of anything. They're full-bodied people. And so I got to dig a little bit into my past and what's made me tick and what would make me take a job in the middle of nowhere and shamelessly flirt with somebody over a walkie-talkie and build her from there. The wonderful thing about Delilah is that there's actually a lot of me in her, meaning like I grew up in Idaho. There are a lot of mountains and wildfires and solitude and stuff like that. I left and I moved to Los Angeles and now I'm surrounded by concrete, but I kind of started out in the same place.
I was integrating so much of the way you speak and the way you like tell a joke or laugh just back into the character. Do you feel like you had to create that stuff to be Delilah, or were you making a concerted effort to sort of like become her?
I think it's a little bit of both. I am a bit of a smartass, and so a lot of the stuff that you wrote really lent itself to that. But you know, as we started getting into the puns, you know, wouldn't you liken to know and stuff like that, I was able to kind of sit back into this woman who just doesn't give a shit. You know, she's out there in the middle of nowhere and having fun because this is her life. And so having that freedom to just be an idiot, it was really freeing. It was a lot of fun.
Okay, so that was the end of the Delilah tape.
So that was exiting the cave, correct?
That was
Hey, it's Chris again.
exiting
this is
the
Ollie
cave.
again.
Hey, Ollie.
Hey, Chris.
Where you
No,
are
it's
right
Dawn
now
of
in the
Final
game
Day.
represents by far the biggest change to sort of environmental ambience that we did in the whole game in terms of visuals and audio and everything else. It was just a totally different outdoor kind of vibe.
Yeah, it was really important that the end of the game felt very sort of climactic and exciting, and for the style of this, we actually looked at first-person views of like real forest fighting that had been recorded in Australia, and it was so intense, and the thought of like trying to hit that, like the benchmark had been set, right? So we had to try and get something that captured that feeling. I think we were all surprised by how close it got in the end.
Yeah, for sure. It was. I was really impressed.
Yeah, it was amazing how close we got to the original vision, given without special casing any tools. Like the tools that we had enabled us to get this effect like very quickly, and it was something I'd been putting off for a long time because I was really scared of being able to deliver something that felt, exciting. And then I remember bringing everyone into the room and going, hey guys, I think we got it.
Yeah,
I
that's
think we
awesome.
did it. Yeah.
On the audio system, I did have to special case a bunch of stuff, but what ended up happening was, because of the needs of this day, I ended up redoing the way audio ambience worked for the whole game to be able to support dropping elements in and out, which ended up being really useful retroactively for the earlier days when I went back and changed those. So, yeah.
Great.
Medicine wheel, so here. This one.
We're coming up on the end here, Jake.
It's true, we are.
You are about to hear or have currently heard the voice of Ned Goodwin, which we didn't know we were going to put into the game for a long, long time until we played it. Because originally it was like a note he left you.
We went back and forth early on, too. There was a moment, I think, where we said maybe one of the last conversations you'll have is with Ned Goodwin himself, who's off in the woods. Maybe you'll pick up the radio in his tower. Talked ourselves off that pretty quick, and then, yeah, maybe he leaves you a note, sort of a confessional note.
But then we also sort of bounced off the note because you would find it and it just didn't have the oomph, and it didn't have the sort of cinematic nature of a conversation. And then we went, okay, well, is the response to that to like put Ned Goodwin in the scene? You're gonna meet the guy? Like thought about that for a minute, and then we said, well, you're gonna talk to him, and like, what are you gonna say to him? And then we actually found the middle ground, which was a recorded note, which is like was really great. It was like the thing that it never occurred to us because we had written notes and conversations. The idea of just essentially having an audio log did not like jump out at us for a few weeks, and then it was like, oh wait, you have a tape player.
He's left you recordings of yourself before. It seemed
yeah,
like
it all connected, and I'm really happy with where we landed with it. And also, Mac Brandt is the voice of Ned Goodwin. We had so many auditions, and this happens all the time. You get a lot of very similar auditions, people trying to play someone a certain way, and then Mac put a little bit of a kind of an East Coast accent on it, and just
I remember not being sure about it at first, but you and Chris pushed for Mac, and I'm really glad that we did.
Yeah, he was just a titan. He did
This
such
is
a great job.
a weird, goofy detail of just the sorts of things that you imagine in your head, but Goodwin leaving you this tape has meant that for me, my mental image of Ned Goodwin is that he has no one to talk to, but that like when he left the Shoshone, it was like with a backpack full of just tapes that he's recorded to himself, which obviously doesn't exist and the game doesn't say that, but now like the existence of that tape just painted that strange character detail into my brain. Now that it's on this commentary is definitely
purely canon.
Yeah, hi, Henry. Hey, you better find this before it burns up. We've been causing each other a lot of headaches. Now I gotta go stake out a site that's as fit for living as the one you're about to find. You'll get it when you see it. You can't blame me for keeping an eye on you. Not after bumping into you back in May. Down by the cave, for croc's sake. I've been up here for 3 years. I kept it cozy. Winters are harsh as hell, and I ran out of books. But I got that antenna rigged up, and Delilah, she's a She's a record you don't gotta flip. I kinda get why Brian took to her. About a week ago, I stopped worrying about you finding anything out, and that's right when everything went shithouse with you two. You guys don't know anything about having kids. All right, nobody knows nothing. It ain't Andy and Opie walking down a lake to fish every afternoon. It ain't Mayberry. But you gotta know I didn't kill him. All right, we were climbing. I was teaching him. Brian was uneducated in the way to do anything. He just fucking didn't sink his anchor the right way. You know, I thought about going back, having to answer questions and having to get him put in the ground, and I didn't see the point. Don't come looking for me. Sorry about your wife.
It is Nels once again.
And Jane is back.
And we're here outside of Goodwin's bunker is what we ended up calling it. This is kind of the weird hideaway that Goodwin has been living in for the past 4 years. Which some people may initially think, how could someone do that? That's unrealistic. But actually, we mentioned this briefly earlier in the commentary as well, but there was this man named Christopher Thomas Knight, who is also known as the Maine Hermit or the Last True Hermit, and he was this dude who lived in the woods in central Maine for like over 30 years.
Wow, 30?
30 years, not 4, 30. To the point where he became like a folk tale that kids in the region were like, oh, my mom said we have to be behaved or the hermit will come take us away in the night. And everyone did think, stuff would go disappearing from people's houses or whatever, but almost everybody just thought it was, local naughty teens or whatever leaning into the legend. But there was actually this dude out in the middle of nowhere, and he had this insanely robustly stocked bunker. There's this great GQ piece all about it that had diagrams of how he set up his bunker and where his different supplies were, and that was a major inspiration for this area.
Part of why he could survive for so long was that he would keep raiding nearby homes and campsites, to get his supplies, and then he would hide all his trash basically in these trash holes, I guess. So when we were designing this space, I was told, just look at this article and diagram for some inspiration, and just make sure to have piles of trash around. But the funny thing is, actually, it was kind of hard as a environment artist to just make a pile of trash. Okay, if I have to make a pile of trash, I now have to do the mental homework of thinking, well, what exactly could he have taken from where?
Exactly.
Because even though it's just a pile of trash, but what is actually in the trash and what I'm going to model kind of does, need to make sense and needs to tell a story of you can't just have random TV sets, for example.
Yeah, or a big old car tire or something.
Yeah, that he wouldn't have stolen something like that.
And then the actual shape of the bunker itself, that was more based on these old Native American structures that are actually in Point Reyes, California. Oh. Jake, I think, had seen them or maybe been up there or something, but there were this tribe of Miwok Native Americans who built these underground bunker smokehouse type things. The winters in Maine may be a bit cold, but obviously they don't compare in the least to the high altitude Wyoming national forests. So in all honesty, Goodwin probably should have froze to death winter 1. Ended up way more like Christopher McCandless than the Maine Hermit, but poetic license.
Yeah. And the cool thing, I guess, about this space too is if you go all the way to the end where there is a big window, if you look out there, you can see Henry's tower and also Delilah's tower. That's actually where both of those towers are. We didn't cheat it at all. So Jake did a really good job picking that spot for this bunker.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite moments where you get out to that opening and you realize that not only has he been listening in, but he's literally been able to kind of watch you two the whole time.
Yeah.
You can kind of imagine in your head, like, as Goodwin was listening on his conversation, he was like looking back and forth between the two towers as Henry and Delilah were talking.
Yeah.
It's a very wonderful voyeuristic moment.
Yeah. What a creepy dude.
Yeah, well, he did perfectly. That's exactly what you wanted. You wanted a creepy dude.
Hi, Chris.
Hey, Sean.
So we are here in Ned Goodwin's survival bunker.
Mhm.
Something you'll notice, dear player, is all of his journalistic writings and logs are all over the walls, and you may or may not have read them. And you may or may not have read them because Firewatch isn't really a game that makes you passively digest written materials, like a game like Gone Home, or a game that tells all of its story through logs and journals you find around the world. And that was kind of a design challenge, as a lot of this game was, because so much, when you pick up an important note in Firewatch, Henry will sort of react, and then when you tell Delilah about it, he'll condense it down to a sentence or two about what the point of it is, and then they'll have a conversation about it. But that's not really on the table here, because the helicopter's coming and Henry and Delilah are sort of a little bit further apart. We kind of walked ourselves into a challenge of being able to check all the boxes about who exactly was Ned and what exactly did he have his hand in, and then presenting you a scene that is completely passive to digest, which was difficult, I think.
Yeah, and part of the reason we have to do that is because in games that really lean on a bunch of text throughout the world, generally speaking, those protagonists are either silent or they have prescribed responses to things. Our game is all the dialogue really is contingent on your choices, and so we can't assume you actually read all the words on the page. We basically had to make a call for each note, whether, okay, we're just going to let this player read it or not, or we're making the call that Henry explicitly read it in the fiction and he will state its contents or make explicit acknowledgement of the useful information inside of it. And we just had to, and it just didn't, as you say, just in Goodwin's bunker, it didn't seem to make sense to require all of that. So we basically said, okay, regardless of what Henry does, we have to allow for the player to absorb all this stuff, and we will put all the information in the story there. It's all there if you want to read it. You don't technically have to.
We've arranged that quite well. Seems unrealistic. That a guy hiding on the top of the hill in the middle of the woods trying to stay away from you would leave that rope dangling there. Well, he come in and out of his camp. He did it because he left there permanently. No, I understand that he left the note on the bottom of it for you.
I know I should be relieved. Relieved that there's no evidence of us starting that fire. Relieved that we're not crazy.
Have
There
climbed
wasn't
down
some
that hill and left
conspiracy.
the rope dangling that's on the phone.
But I'm not.
It's a
He was a
forest, right? It's
sweet
national
kid.
park, so people walk by
What a
there all the time.
shitty father who hid out here like a coward after dumping him in a hole.
I think that Ned loved him.
Hey, Chris here.
And Nels, hello.
Hey, Nels.
Hey, buddy.
So you probably just went to Goodwin's bunker and got the message from him and learned about what happened and uncovered a huge part of the story. But as it turns out, you actually don't have to go there at all.
Not in the least. the only thing you actually have to do to kind of keep the game going is listen to that cassette he leaves you.
Right.
After you snatch that cassette, there's kind of that dangling rope, but you can just never climb up that rope. You can just kind of be like, I'm going to evacuate now. Goodbye.
The only reason that's the case is because we literally could not think of any good, reasonable, convincing excuse to force you to go up there.
Yeah.
One of the big challenges in this game, from a design standpoint, was that it's one big connected world, and there are a lot of times where we just can't really force you to go somewhere and do a thing.
Or if we did, it would just be absolutely terrible. Like, we could technically allow you to walk all the way over to Delilah's evacuation tram. You get there and she says, oh, we're not ready to go yet. And then you would have to, like, walk all the way back to where you were, then climb around Goodwin's bunker, and then magically she says, oh, it is actually time to go now. And that would be awful.
And so, because we eventually determined, all right, we have to allow for the player not going through there, that meant Nels and I had to then tackle the other hilarious and difficult problem of making sure that the game and the story didn't break for those players who do never find Goodwin's bunker.
Yeah.
And that was a very complicated and frustrating task, I would say.
Well, technically, you can grab the cassette, listen to it, and then not even tell Delilah about it.
Yeah, there are a lot of different states you can be, conversation states you can be in between getting that tape and getting to Delilah's tower. There's anywhere from only getting the bare minimum conversations because you already exhausted most of it at Goodwin's bunker, all the way up to needing all of that stuff to be recapped on the way because you didn't actually go to the place.
Yeah.
And we had to make sure that all of those possible player sort of actions and combinations of actions all worked and all made for a logical game where the story actually concluded and information didn't just magically appear out of nowhere.
Yeah, there were so many different permutations of it. It's like, okay, we'd finally, like, hog tie one of them, and then one of us would be playing the game and be like, but wait, what if you don't do this? Then we have to be like, ugh, okay, so what do we do if you do this, but not that, but this? Okay, we have that one covered.
And then you go this direction rather than that direction.
Right, because that's the other thing is, like, walking to Delilah's, there are so many different paths you could technically take. We had to, like, slap down just, like, 15 different triggers probably to just catch all the different, like, went this way but then looped over that way. It was a horrible mess.
Good times.
Firewatch.
So, Rich, as you know, we struggled so hard to find you, to find the voice of Henry.
And I was here all along.
We're just right there in the valley, waiting for us. And you were discovered, basically not discovered, but contacted via Twitter.
Those two things are synonymous.
Yeah. It's interesting to me because I don't think I knew who Henry was until you read for the character. And then I went like, oh, of course. You feel like you had to bring something out of the ordinary to him, or something created, or was it more of an amalgam of the words on the page and who you are as a person?
I think the latter more than the former. I mean, I think that Henry and I differ chiefly in that I would probably classify him as an introvert, and I would classify myself as an extrovert. And so I think pretty much flipping merely that switch did that for me, and you know, that coupled with the words that made pretty clear what this guy was going through. And I think too, it probably did not hurt that I was recording this thing, you know, in a tiny little upright coffin, basically, where every wall is bumping my body in some way. So there was a feeling of, even though this game takes place out in the woods, there was certainly a feeling of isolation that probably didn't hurt as we were recording. I'm going to bounce that back to you and say that I think that the writing was pretty clear on who Henry was, and I just tried to sound like that guy, I guess.
This was your first voice acting gig, really, right?
Yeah, my first video game for sure. This came right at a time when I was trying to get into voiceover.
Does the type of work that is so different than being on stage or on camera, does it fulfill you in the same way? Do you find is it tickle sort of a different pleasure sensor in your like brain, or?
I wouldn't say it's exactly the same, but it's certainly a different part of my brain. But I would say it's at least as fulfilling as anything I've ever done on camera, because there's sort of a freedom in the booth that isn't there if you're on camera. There's a lot of sort of, you can't move too far that way, and you can't block your other actor's light, and you know, there's a lot of technical stuff you have to keep in your brain that has no bearing on what you're doing here. I mean, the most technical thing I have to worry about is that I don't get so loud that it clips the sound. Otherwise, that's kind of it. So I have free, full acting available range, and that's an exciting thing, and in a lot of ways more exciting to me than on camera work.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, Sean.
I don't know about you, but I get a lot of email and tweets about people really, really wanting Delilah to be in the tower at the end of the game.
I hear about that a fair amount myself.
And I am really, really happy with the performances of Henry or Rich and Sissy here in the canyon when she says there's a helicopter that's ready for me to get on it.
Yeah.
And if you're wondering why we ended up making the creative decision we made, there's sort of two things that I know Chris and I spoke a lot about. One is Delilah is simply not the type of person to wait for anyone. And Chris did a really good job with me just sort of painting a portrait of her emotional state and what it would feel like to be waiting for this guy to show up after a really, really tragic thing has happened, and then just sit in this tower and wait for a helicopter, thinking about this dead kid and how like messed up their entire summer had been.
Yeah.
And the
you
dread.
You wrote that almost like directly.
Yeah, and that's what I did. You basically painted that portrait for me, and I went, oh well, she's just gonna say that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to like sit here in the shadow of a dead boy.
Mm-hmm.
And I went like, yep, all right, thank you for giving me that. And then alternatively, Henry's wanted nothing more than to be made to feel better over the past 5-10 years of his life. Definitely the past 5, definitely the past 1. And that feeling of disappointment that you feel when you open the door and she's not there, even though you ask her to stay, and you can hear how badly Henry wants her to stay in Rich's performance and in his voice. I wanted that feeling to go into the player, that level of disappointment. And then for some players to think, man, but how disappointed would I really be if I was him? And obviously we can't make you think that stuff, but if we do, then I feel like the story has been successful in communicating the sort of the emotional payload that it set out to provide. So there you go.
Hi, it's Ollie again.
And it's Jane again.
So this is Delilah's Tower. Funny fact, this was one of the first things we concepted and built in the game. We always knew that the game would end with Delilah's Tower, and I think we all liked the idea of the title screen being Delilah's Tower. So that was one of the first things we did as a sort of test. But it wasn't until closer to the end of the game that we really thought about what Delilah's tower would be like on the inside.
Yeah. And by that point, we kind of, we were very well acquainted with all
Towers.
sorts of towers. And so I don't even think we had a big concept about it. We just kind of went in and went through all our references, and we just decided, we should have this kind of ceiling and like
We should
different
just change
cabinets.
it. Yeah, it should feel familiar, but
Yeah.
sort of different enough that it feels like a Delilah's
Yeah.
place. And we thought about all the things that the player learns about Delilah across the
Yeah,
across
that was
the game,
really fun.
and try and communicate that through things, but also maybe some things that you don't know about
Yeah.
Delilah that are interesting to find out.
I remember when I was just making props for her space, that I would ask Sean, hey, like, if she were just eating a snack, what would it be? And Sean would just say, peanut butter and apples. And I would just ask Sean, what kind of slippers would she have? And, we would just have to think about, through the props, tell sort of a little bit of, character of who Delilah is, like what kind of shoes she wear would just be the fun kind of things to think about.
Interesting fact also that the behind the mask of the firefighter who collects Henry at the end is actually Henry's own face, because it's the only face that we had modeled in the game. I really like the idea that potentially someone would have noticed and thought it was this insane twist.
Third ending.
Yeah, third ending. Henry sees himself and
John Malkovich
realizes
moment.
that it was all a dream. Henry died in the cave-in on the way into the.
He
on the way into the
rescues
park.
himself.
Yeah, that's so good.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, Sean.
It's the last scene of the game.
Yeah, this took some getting.
This was very difficult.
Yeah.
Something you would say in story meetings all the time, which was, I was really afraid of writing the scene, and I was really afraid of the end of the game, which I had never experienced in my career.
Yeah, we went up to the wire.
You would say to me, oh, you're going to feel it out when you write it. And you would say that, you're sort of like, and you'll figure that out on the page when you're working, when we were trying to really talk about the beats of this last scene. And I would go like, okay. And some direction that you gave me that was really valuable was just the muted nature of this scene, because everything that has been said has already been said, and there's sort of nothing left to do. And you get to a point in your life where that is true, often. But movies and games never really explore what that space feels